Remember, falling into gravity or falling into structure, those are the things that we call time. Which is why I told you that part of the understanding that organized complexity brings is that human beings don't age anymore and human beings don't die anymore. Because now you understand. You see, because that process of being born and then dying is a tremendous deal for human self-consciousness. There are two singularities that the human being always struggles to deal with: birth and death. One creates the other in that sense. Because the question for a self-observing being who's observing himself or observing herself so deeply and so intimately that it is profound, right? But guess what? There was a time when you weren't here to observe. So where were you? So how can something so profound be so fickle, such that it did not exist at some time and then it existed? No. The human mind struggles to deal with that. It's one of the two singularities that exist in the consciousness space, all right? And what it does is that it limits us necessarily. But the truth is that birth is like a transformation into a reality. It's not the beginning of something per se, even though it is technically the beginning of a physical self, but that is the bringing of things that are scattered and bring them together to a point. Everything that is used to assemble you in the womb, it was somewhere else before it started to assemble you. And wherever it was or whatever it was doing, it was part of a long continuity that stretches all the way to the beginning of the universe. No unbroken chain. The iron in your blood was synthesized in stars. The carbon that you are made of was synthesized in stars. That synthesis is a reality. Just because you're not here to observe or you weren't here to observe, it doesn't mean that it didn't exist. So whatever it is that you are organization that is self-aware of organization. Prior to that, you are organization that is not self-aware of organization. You're organization. So you exist scattered across everything. No focus, no nucleus. And then being born is a molding into a central point where you can now activate a sun in your head as a sense of self. So you become an observer of self. And the only reason, you see, observation is an assessment. So why are you making an assessment? Why does there need to be an observer in the universe? Why do you have to have a sun, both in the sky and astrologically? Why? It's because you are assessing something. It means that there is an existing story, and then you are going through that story in order to realize what the story is. So that the end product of self-observation is self-realization. And the thing that emerges, the thing that is being transformed across all these things is the nature of truth. The hypotheses and the guesses that ultimately become true or false. Those are the realizations. Now, prior to being born, nobody asks whether something is true or false, because the question does not exist. All the laws of the universe are fully integrated into oneness. There is no area of reality where nature is operating in a way that doesn't know what it is. It's a simulation that only occurs in human heads. It's what we call our agency, our sense of self. And the reason why it exists is because in order for us to be observers, we must pretend that we are separate in some sense. There must be some dissonance, but it's a controlled dissonance. The dissonance itself is quantized. So that all vibrations are precisely descriptive, meaning they have precise definitions. And that's why we can have a personality in the first place. Our personalities are not made from haphazard things. Usually personalities are structured. It's a geometry, it's a complex geometry, but some things lead to some things, lead to some things, lead to some things. That's how everything is connected. We depend on the fact that people don't just wake up and act crazy. They just like blow a gasket in their head and they just go insane. Once you notice that behavior, you know that something has broken. It's not a general flow of reality. But these days we are so much at risk of it. Why? Because the stories we're telling have become very horrific. We have imagined that the dissonance that exists in reality can take on any value, and that's not true. You can try to give it any value that you want, but all you will do is you will create the corrections. That's what happens all the time. It is inevitable. And if you've read one of my, I think the second to last paper, I described what this inevitability is mathematically. It's the rules. You can't break the rules. That's just what it is. You see? When you talk about the conservation of energy, the conservation of this, conservation of momentum, you're really just talking about the rules. That's how they are manifesting in the area that you are studying them. Because they are rules. That's really what it is. They are rules. And you are observing because you are observing the rules. And ultimately, self-realization comes from the fact that you're not really observing the rules. You are observing yourself. You are those rules. You want to know where you were before you were born? You were the rules. Whatever you think of this universe, the rules that operate within them, well, that's what you are. You know, you can get poetic and say that before you are born, you are a watcher. You cannot participate. You can only watch. And when you are born into a projection of some kind. And in that projection, you can go through programs whereby you can animate your own realities. It's almost like a cocoon or a space created for you to have this feeling. But before you can have the feeling, something very important has to be done to you. Your sense of all-knowing needs to be taken away from you. And that includes the memory of what you were, what you have always been. Otherwise, if you can make reference to that, you will not be deceived. You will know that whatever this is not real, you know. You would immediately know that. And so the fear of death will completely disappear because there will be no death. So for you to feel like you are in a limited, contained system, your agency requires that you are ignorant, so that you can now tell different types of stories as an experience. But it's not an indulgence. It's like when you stretch a rubber band, it goes back to its normal position. It's not an indulgence. The aim of the observation is you are making your way back to the truth of what you really are, of what existence really is. And that is the nature of self-realization. It is the nature of enlightenment. It is what human beings today have forgotten. They don't know what that truth is anymore. And in the absence of that awareness, a lot of stories have been floated to say, okay, this is what the awareness is, and that's what the awareness. That's not true. All right? There is only one story. And when we conduct your natal chart synthesis, we are looking at your one story. We have a map that is telling us symbolically the reason why you are experiencing existence. Why have you come? Yeah, I feel that some of the notations are not, the symbolisms, the functional lights are not enough. I understand why a couple of people are introducing asteroids, so many different types of asteroids, but the danger with that is the meaning behind asteroids and the meaning behind functional lights. They're not things that people discovered today. They are very old, because the amount of time it takes to make observations. You know, think of all the characteristics or the attributes or the aptitudes associated with Venus as a functional light. You think these things were just plucked from the air? They come from probably thousands of years of observation, because that is how you know anything. You observe, you assess, you measure. And the reward for that is that you become a better programmer of reality, because now you have knowledge. And unlike today, where people just scheme for the surface knowledge, they just scheme the surface for knowledge just to be able to make technology. But knowledge is deeper than that. Knowledge has it goes all the way to the core. And what is the core? What is the core? Okay, in you as a human being, the core sits at the core of your sexuality. But in physics or in mathematics and whatever, the core are the 3 6s that represent the nucleus of how complexity is generated. Let me don't put it that way, because then it sounds very vague. No. The 3 6s are the nucleus of the fundamental theorem of arithmetic. And I'm sure that so many mathematicians, I'm sure that so many scholars or academicians, when they hear me say something like that, they will immediately dismiss the whole thing as nonsense. How can you say that? Yeah, but I don't say it lightly. I say it because I have proof. That's it. So if you think that it's nonsense, then disprove it. In disproving it, just be sure that you are disproving the whole of arithmetic, the whole of mathematics, everything. You're just rubbishing everything completely. All right? So that's really what it is. Now, being able to feel like a son, to feel as if you are in charge, you feel like a person with knowledge, but the space ahead of you appears to be very wide, unstructured, and largely unknown. And that is a consequence of the fact that just to become an observer, you are decoupled in some sense from your sense of all-knowing, your sense of your true history from the beginning of the universe, maybe even pre-universe. You are decoupled from it. You don't have access to it. So in other words, you don't know anything. And so you appear like a discoverer, like someone who is searching around for themselves in some sense. And that's the condition that every human being is born into. It's the condition that every human being is dealing with. And because it's such a primordial condition, the essence of human civilization is the address of this particular question. Now, human civilization is inevitable. It is a firm byproduct of self-consciousness. All right? Storytelling, where the self can be centered or the self can be referenced. The structural form of this condition is what you call number. And so it intimates the human on the core principles underlying reality. So some people think that you need, Large Hadron Colliders and Fermi Labs and James Webb Space Telescopes in order to figure out all the mysteries of the universe. Well, yeah, in some sense, because you need details. Why? Because you want to make things and tools and etc. Right? That's the priority. But if you want to understand why, then you don't need any of those things. You don't need any. You can validate, but with those tools, you can validate things and make things precise, and you can create or imprint structure. Okay, but that is, you can bring out structure that's, it is there, it is not there. But by the time you bring it out, it's now there. It's now fixed. It's now knowledge. Okay, knowledge, people now attach different motives to it. You understand? What I'm saying is that the depth of knowledge, the true nature of knowledge as it goes down to the core, it comes with a resolution of the nature of good and bad, the nature of good and evil, which is like the quintessential form of the duality experienced by the nature of birth and death. Two singularities that every human mind has been grappling with. But with the right understanding, the right knowledge, then these two singularities, they're not extremes of each other. They fade away in some sense. They fade into the distance. The same way ignorance fades when knowledge is acquired. So people don't experience those limitations anymore. They're free of them. What type of motives will you have when you're free of birth and death? I understand people want to do things because it takes 20 years to do something and I think it's a long time and everything. What about having a project that takes 2 billion years? What's wrong with it? If you're not going to die, then what is 2 billion years? What is it really? It's just an observational interval. And if maybe you're tired of observing, you can go to sleep. If you can decide that you want to sleep for 1 billion years. Well, if you know how, of course. And when you're tired of sleeping, you can wake up. What I'm trying to say is that the type of motives human beings will have when they are free of these two things, you can't really tell. It's, because almost every motive that we have today is rooted in limitation. That sense of limitation, these two singularities. Because these two singularities, that's what's making everybody out in this world right now. Those who are the most afraid of death, they are the ones that are very cruel, very extreme. It's like the fear forces them to become extremely shrewd in terms of self-preservation. Do you understand? And that's because the story they are telling themselves about the reality, and I've talked about this, I have a podcast about this where I talk about these perspectives being shaped by climatic patterns, ancestral climatic patterns on Earth. And those who grew up in environments where nature was literally constantly trying to kill you, constantly, they develop different perspectives regarding the nature of God. And those who grew up in environments where things may still be dangerous yet, but there's sustenance, beneficence. Nature seems to respond in ways that appear as if once you just know the rules, everything is okay and bountiful. And people may dismiss this, but this has played a tremendous role in the type of stories or the predisposition of stories that human beings are telling on this planet. That's really what it is. Okay, but both of these stories are driven by these two singularities, the moment of birth and the moment of death. Now, in some sense, they are the same thing. Let me explain why. One of the key features of organized complexity is that you can describe the most complex thing that you can imagine. The framework of organized complexity can describe any type of complexity, no matter how complex it is. It can always have a representation. Now, this representation, it's pretty interesting. Why? Because it's order. Normally, when things become very complex, very chaotic, and people don't understand them anymore. So you can imagine that randomness is often used as the way to represent something that nobody can understand. Oh, an increase in entropy, completely random system. Nobody knows what that means. There is no random system. Nobody can define what a random system truly is. And how would you know that it is a totally random system? If you can create an entirely, completely isolated random system, you would have created an entire new universe. That's really what it is. Why? Because how can there be true randomness? The whole of nature is connected into one thing. The whole of nature is one thing. All the laws, all the rules, you can unite them into one thing. So if you have a truly random something, then it means that that oneness is disconnected from that place. It's not possible. That's not the way existence works. Once you do that, it means that you have broken existence. And you can't break existence because there's no outside to existence in that sense. That's really what it is.